welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet, and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Jason. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing? Is your throat going to make it through this podcast?
Yeah, it's probably not the sickest I've ever been while we record an episode, but I'm definitely battling a cold right now. So hopefully people can still understand what I'm saying. But if I start to lose my voice, I do apologize in advance.
I'm sure you'll do just fine. So
I'm really excited for this episode. It's been a couple of weeks since we last recorded, and there's been a flurry of announcements from some of the teams that we cover. So excited to delve into it.
I think we're at the point now where we're going to start to do the regular weekly recording. We're not going to intentionally do any 2-week gaps, I think, for the next little bit anyway. So I'm looking forward to catching up on a whole bunch of things. But if you are a new listener to our podcast, though, because it is episode 2 of the new season, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
So our podcast focuses on all levels of soccer in Calgary. We talk a lot about the city's 2 professional teams, those being Cavalry FC and the Calgary Wild. But basically anything that has a Calgary connection and is related to soccer, we try to cast a pretty wide net over that topic.
Yeah, and this week we've got a whole bunch of news from Cavalry FC, signings, departures, new kit, schedule. We'll try and talk about all those things. We'll also talk about the Calgary Wild. Their schedule came out earlier today, actually, and there's been a little bit of player news, and we'll get into that. And a couple other updates about a few other Calgary players. I think a couple weeks ago we did some updates. We got a few more we're going to add in there. So I think that should cover us off, I think, quite nicely for this week.
I agree. Let's dive right into it.
I'm James McGlinchey. This is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So, Jason, Cavalry's preseason is officially underway. Last week, they held open trials from Wednesday to Friday, and you managed to attend one of those days.
Yeah, so how it works for these open trials is it's a 3-day affair. It goes from Wednesday to Friday, and I was there for the final day Friday when they were playing a couple of 11v11 matches with basically the 34 players that they had whittled it down to. So it was pretty interesting to watch, and a lot of the senior players were around too. So yeah, it was kind of a fun way to spend part of the morning.
And I understand you did catch up with former podcast guest and assistant coach for Cavalry, Jay Wheeldon.
Jay was really the point man in charge of these open trials. So I did speak to him just for a couple of minutes. I just thought I'd ask him a couple questions about some of the players, like just in a general sense, where they came from and also what the pathway would be if someone was successful at these trials.
Yeah, so you did record that conversation. So I guess we can start our Cavalry discussion with hearing from Jay about the open trials, and then we'll kind of expand on that to talk about some of the club's more recent announcements since you were there on Friday.
Tell us about the format of how it all works.
Yeah, so we had, over 100 register for the event and from different ages and parts of the world, right? We've had some really cool stories come in. So what's been good about it is, yesterday they played 2.5 hours of 7v7 small-sided games. So got plenty of minutes. The first day was more about the physical measurements and the testing to see where they're at physically. And today we were able to select what we feel is the 34 strongest players, and they're going to play a game today against our academy. So this is game 1, and then there's another game at 1:00. Sorry.
With these players, like you said, they have a lot of cool stories. It's really people from around the globe, people, Canada, United States, around the world. I know there's that gent from Holland that I saw yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some good players, obviously, locally that, are playing at League One level. A couple of university players, few that have flown in from whether it be Ontario to see where they can get. And then, we've had, one lad from England. We had one lad from Holland that have come in and they've showcased themselves well, that both have been invited back to them.
What would be the best outcome for one of these players? Like, would they get a trial like with the senior club, or are they someone that would be put into the youth program depending on their age?
Yeah, so the reality is what we're looking at for players is, if they're 2008 and younger, the reality is we're looking at them for our academy group. If they're 2007 older, we're looking at them for our first team. So the next steps for them would be to get a trial, get a week with either the first team or the academy, even 2 weeks, and see from there. So reality is we see how they do today, compare them to, what we feel is our better young crop. And if they do well and showcase themselves, then good for them.
Okay, Scott, as far as I'm aware, none of the players that were at trials have been invited back yet to Cavalry's camp, but I'm of the understanding that those evaluations are still happening. So it's possible that some of those players could come back. It was a really interesting mix. There were a lot of players from Alberta there, like a lot of younger players that probably would be more academy type players. I know there was a guy from Brooks and a guy from Red Deer and some guys who play on Calgary-based clubs already. So there was no shortage of some younger players, but then there were a few other older players. They were kind of interesting. There was that one guy, I believe his last name was Higbeek. He's like 22 years old and he's from Holland and he's like 6'5", and man, he looks the part of a pro footballer. Well, I did want to say one player that did catch my eye and I was quite impressed with was not one of the new trialists, but Jackson Marchant, Calgary Villains prospect. He was playing for Cavalry's academy team that was involved in those matches, and he scored a goal. And from what I was watching, he was a player that caught my eye. He's a bigger guy, plays up front, and anyway, like I said, I thought it was worth the mention.
For sure. So since the open trials last week, Cavalry has begun its preseason training camp, as mentioned, and they've been making announcements pretty much every day since. Hey, like this week, it was a pretty busy time for my email inbox with Cavalry-related news releases. So let's start with the schedule because just this week we found out when Cavalry will be playing their matches in 2026, and games are coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, so Cavalry's going to open their season on the road. They're going to be at Pacific on April 5th, and the home opener is going to be on April 12th against Ottawa.
Yeah, it's definitely an early start to the 2026 season. I don't recall Cavalry ever kicking off their regular season this early before. If you think back to the inaugural season in 2019, their first game of the year was on May 4th. So this is basically a month earlier than that. Their home opener, April 12th, a rematch against Atletico Ottawa, the two teams that competed in last year's final. And Jason, even though the league is kicking off earlier than perhaps usual, it's going to be extended this year due to a 2-week pause in the summer to accommodate the World Cup. So there's a good chance that the 2026 final could also be played in snowy conditions, as was the case, of course, last year.
I'm not exactly sure how much longer the schedule will be, whether it's going to be 1 or 2 weeks extra than it was last time. But just to give you some perspective, Cavalry's last match of the year this year is the last weekend in October. In 2025, in the last weekend in October, they were playing the playoff game. So things are going to be pushed back a little bit. So it's going to be a bit of a different schedule. There's going to be that break. It's just over 2 weeks, I think, between June 10th and 28th. There's no matches for the Cavs. And there's also a bit of a quirk in there that there's going to be like 4 weeks in the early part of May where there's going to be no home matches.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. We have seen these kinds of stretches in Cavalry seasons where they don't play home games. And typically that's due to equestrian events that Spruce Meadows hosts at the same time. I don't know, though, if that would be the case in May.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't recall there being a big gap like this, like in the springtime before. Maybe there was. I just don't recall it. But yeah, it's going to be a bit of a break.
Yeah, so broken down, there are 8 home games on Saturday and 4 on Sunday, and then 2 Friday night light games. So thankfully, no midweek games again this year, which I know were always the lowest attended in Cavalry's history.
All right, Scott, let's talk about some of the player movement with Cavalry FC this week. We had a couple of players depart, and we had one new arrival.
Yeah, let's start with the arrival. Midfielder Harry Paton signed a multi-year deal. Jason, he's technically the 100th Cavalry signing, which is a bit of an eyebrow raiser to know that many players will have worn the red of Cavalry FC. But a good milestone for the club. And yeah, Harry Paton, he has CPL experience. He was with Forge FC last year, although didn't make that many appearances, but a pretty impressive resume overall. He's played a lot of professional soccer in Scotland.
Yeah, he's originally from Kitchener, Ontario, but yeah, he's spent most of his life playing soccer in Scotland, and he's played for various teams in various levels there. His brother Ben's also a professional footballer, and he's actually been with Forge for a while. So like last year, Harry joined him just for the end of the season. I think he played in the Scottish season and then came over and just finished off the season with Forge, but it was a really short-term contract. So he is going to add a lot to the midfield, and Schmidt Shom and not around. I think that it's probably pretty safe to say that going to be probably a pretty regular fixture in the midfield starting lineup.
Yeah, for sure. And Diego Gutierrez, another departure. Meaning there were spaces to be filled in the center of the park for Cavalry, and yeah, mentioning his career thus far, 120 games, I believe, in the Scottish Premier League. He's played for the likes of Motherwell FC. He played for Ross County and made 100 appearances for them. I guess his time there would have coincided with the arrival of Victor Latourie and Willie Akio. They both went to Ross County, right? So yeah, I'm excited to see how he does and if he does hammer down a starting spot, because as we've talked about, with the loss of Shamit Shom, big shoes to fill.
And another thing was mentioned in the press release, which I didn't realize, but he actually has a past with head coach Tommy Wheeldon Jr.
Yeah, he represented Canada at the U17 level and was coached by Tommy Wheeldon Jr. That would have been quite a while ago. 10 years ago was when Tommy was involved with that program. He also actually has caps at the U20 and senior levels. He played a game for Canada in 2023.
So Harry Paton's the big signing this week. We know that there's going to be a couple more players announced, but as of recording on Thursday night, we don't know who they are. There were a couple of departures announced. Probably the first one to talk about is Fraser Aird, officially not going to be back with the club this year.
Yeah, this is a big loss. Fraser Aird has been the starting right back for, I want to say, 3 seasons in a row. And I think in that 2024 season it was that he was probably one of Cavalry's best players, right? One of the most important players, a name that was probably put on the starting 11 team sheet very early into the process. So big loss for the club. And interesting farewell message from him on social media.
Yeah, he was pretty clear in the message on Instagram that leaving the club was not his choice. Like, he was out of contract, but I guess Cavalry was not interested in re-signing him, because the message was, quote, "Not how I wanted it to end, but sometimes in our careers, things are out of our control. On to the next chapter."
Yeah, that is, you can read between the lines there. It could be cryptic in the sense of not how I wanted it to end, in the sense that, he didn't get to lift a trophy after his last game with the club. It is nice that he got to score a goal in his last game, though.
He was a pretty go-to, dependable guy at the penalty spot. He really seemed to excel at that.
Yeah, I don't know how many penalties he took for Cavalry. Definitely a couple, but overall, I mean, it wasn't a great start for him with Cavalry. I think after he was signed, he suffered a pretty serious injury that kept him out of the team for better part of a whole season. But as mentioned, since probably 2023, he's been a stalwart presence in Cavalry's starting 11. So I'm very curious to see who kind of fills in that spot. Jason, like, he's made the right back spot his own these last few years. So it's going to take some getting used to seeing someone else line up there week in, week out.
So what do you think there, Scott? We know that Levi Lang can play there and did spend a little bit of time at right back. And of course, Michael Harms has been re-signed. And I know that, big things are expected of him, eventually. Do you think the Cavs could go into the season with those two players kind of fighting it out for minutes at that position? Or do you think that they're going to bring someone else in?
Well, we thought last year could be a breakout year for Michael Harms. You and I predicted that he'd get a lot more playing time than he did in 2024. And that wasn't the case, right? Like, he was still around the club all the time, but only got 1 or 2 appearances and often wasn't on the bench. But yeah, I don't know if this is the year that we see Michael Harms get regular playing time at right back, or as you mentioned, if Levi Lang, who's a naturalized center back, if he slots one side over, because as you mentioned, he did play quite a bit at right back last year. Or maybe we'll see another signing. There's still a little bit of space on the roster, and maybe they want to a more experienced, specialized right back. But I could also see them start the season with those two players duking it out for minutes on the wing.
Another player who saw a lot of minutes in 2025 also moved on this week, Callum Montgomery. He was under contract, but he was transferred to Detroit City in the States.
Yeah, USL Championship team. Pretty good move for him, honestly, Jason. We know the USL Champ is a good league and probably pays a bit more on average than the CPL does. But yeah, I think you and I had already speculated that he could be on his way out with the arrival of Amir Didic. Definitely seemed like he would be the third choice center back, or depending on if Levi Lang slotted to right back, maybe the fourth choice. But, he did have a great 2025 season. I thought it was his best year in a Cavalry jersey. And I think fans will definitely be sad to see him go, in the sense that he really was, an ambassador for the club as well as a player.
Oh, definitely. He was doing a lot of off the field stuff for the team for sure. Last year, there were a few gaffes, though, that were costly ones, I guess. But
he's always been like mistake prone and the kind of player who when he makes a mistake, it's like it results in a goal. So I think those did accumulate throughout his 2 years with the club.
And at the end of the year, it seemed like he had kind of lost the confidence of the coaches. They put Tom Field in. So with Didic around, the minutes were going to be hard to come by. So hopefully that's a move that works out well for everybody.
And then the third and final departure that the club announced this week is German Nicholas Wahling, who you and I also speculated last episode could be out the door. You and I talked a lot about Nicholas Wahling, how we didn't really know how he was best used for Cavalry. He definitely had a better 2025 season than 2024, but it still felt like there's big question marks around how useful he could be. If he was never really a starter. Most of his appearances came from off the bench. For an attack-minded player, I just don't think he contributed enough in the goals and assists department.
Yeah, he kind of was a bit of a utility player and played a few different positions. But yeah, I guess he was out of contract and opportunity came up in the 4th division. Is that FC Karl Zeiss Jena? Am I close on that, Scott? Your German pronunciation. Here, you always like showcasing your ability to pronounce things in German correctly. Am I close on that?
It's FC Karl Zeiss Jena, and they play in the Regionalliga Nordost. So yeah, that would be the equivalent of the 4th division, considered semi-pro technically, but I believe this club, they do play in a pretty big ground. Their stadium has a capacity of about 15,000, and the great thing about German football is no matter what level a team plays at, teams have really solid local support. So I wouldn't be surprised if he actually ends up playing in front of bigger crowds than he was used to in the CPL. But I don't know if too many Cavalry fans will be disappointed in his departure, simply because of, as we mentioned, he was always more of a utility player than no starter.
So there's one player from the 2025 Cavalry roster, which is their fate for 2026 is still unknown, and that's Ali Musi, Scott.
Yeah.
I was watching when I was at open trials. I saw a lot of players there. I chatted with a couple players, but I was really making a point of, trying to see who I could see and who I couldn't see. And I was definitely looking to see if I could notice Ali Musi. I did not, but he still isn't signed anywhere. What do you think? Do you think his chances of returning to Cavalry, it's still a possibility?
It's still a possibility, but Tommy Wheeldon Jr. was pretty upfront in his end of year interview on the club's social media channels at the end of December that he is looking elsewhere, right? He wants a new challenge somewhere else and maybe an opportunity to increase his pay. And Tommy said that, we are still in the mix in terms of where he could end up playing in 2026, but that if he does land something that interests him, and they're not going to stand in his way. So I don't really expect him to come back. I do think Cavalry fans would be really relieved if he did, but unless he really wants to be here, then maybe it might be best for him to find greener pastures elsewhere.
I'm actually going on a different tact on that, Scott. I think every day that there's no announcement that he's signed elsewhere, the chances of him coming back to Cavalry increase. I really thought he would have signed somewhere else by now, but I just think maybe it's a situation where he's looked around for offers and there hasn't really been anything that's been all that much more appealing than what he has here. I'm guessing that Tommy Wheeldon Jr. probably has an offer, kind of a standing offer in place, at least for a while, that he could come back to. But if he hasn't found a good option yet, he might end up coming back, because he probably does still have the option to come back. And if nothing else looks better, maybe he will.
I guess that's true. I just why wasn't he there last week? That's kind of...
Well, I think he hasn't signed yet, or he was being hidden. That's the only other thing, right? Because the thing about this open trial was it was open to the public. Like, I did get some access because of the podcast, but there were just people walking around. So it's entirely possible that he could be with the club and they just made a point of like, you need to not be seen. You need to get out of here while this is all going on. I think that's possible.
But I mean, I'm sure you're seeing these videos that Cavalry puts up where they do those little, those TikTok trends, right? Where they ask players questions. I think they did one after the beep test, and then it was all the players saying, "This is me before the beep test," and then it cuts to them after the beep test. And all those videos, I have yet to see him, right? So I mean, you're right in the sense that maybe he's just not signed yet, so he can't be there. But it's just the absence is kind of glaring.
Those videos that are being done, they're vetted to make sure that nobody that's not supposed to be in them isn't in them. I think these teams are very careful about what's in and what's not in. There's the chances of somebody being in the background by accident. They're really watching for that.
Last thing we'll mention before we kind of end our Cavalry segment is they unveiled their 2026 home jersey, Jason, and it's a bit of a throwback in many ways to the 2019 kit, which is kind of neat to see. I like most elements of this jersey. I really like the white sash down from shoulder to corner, and how it kind of the crest looks really great, the way that it's embedded into that sash. However, I really am not a fan of puffy collars, and Cavalry went with a really big collar on this one, the biggest they've ever had.
I'm just going to go on the record saying that I've never seen a collar on a jersey that I like. It's not something I like. But I know you kind of made a comment about it's this type of collar. I just generally don't like collars, but I think the rest of the jersey is really sharp. I like it. I like the retro vibes and all the other elements of it. I'm good with. I think it's overall a pretty good kit. But yeah, I'm always a little bit hesitant on the collar.
Well, I have one example of a collared jersey that I really liked, and I told you this in a text message, but England at Euro 2004, they had a collar, and I don't know why it looked, it worked, but it did. And then I know some of the Manchester United jerseys in the 1990s had collars, and for instance, Eric Cantona was famous for always puffing up his collar, right? And having it up so that it was kind of by his ears. And I'm curious if any Cavalry players will replicate that. But yeah, in general, this kit, the home jersey, I like it. But again, the collar is a bit of a question mark for me.
Hi, it's Janaea Robertson, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, Scott, let's shift focus and talk about the Calgary Wild. I think the first thing we want to talk about here probably is the schedule. The NSL schedule was released earlier today, Thursday, and we got a listing of the matches for this year.
Yeah, so we know that the Wild's home opener and first game of the season will be on Saturday, April 25th. They'll be taking on the Montreal Roses at McMahon Stadium, same day as a Cavalry match. Most of the Wild's home games will be played on Saturday, 7 of their 12, and then 3 games on Sundays, and then 1 Friday evening game, and then 1 Wednesday evening game.
Yeah, I think last year they had 1 midweek game as well, so I guess it's just part of a quirk in the schedule. But yeah, did you notice something that last year they had 13 home matches? They had 13 home and 12 away, and this year it's the other way around. Maybe they're trying to even that out.
Yeah, potentially. It's too bad they couldn't add a team to the NSL, right, to maybe make it more of an equitable home and away schedule. But alas, not the easiest thing to do, I guess.
Well, they're saying that maybe next year and talking about Winnipeg. So we'll see. But yeah, we got a schedule, which is always good to see. I noticed that all of the matches, the days and the locations have been announced, but no start times yet. But I'm assuming that'll come soon.
We also got an announcement of a departing player, Jason, goalkeeper Jackie Burns, who only played 2 games for the club, will be leaving or has left. So not the biggest surprise considering her relative lack of playing time. She's going to England, a bit closer to home. She's from Northern Ireland, but she'll be joining Bristol City.
Yeah, I actually think she played with Bristol City. I'm not sure if that was the team she played with right before she moved to Calgary, but she has played for them in the past. So yeah, this move is not surprising because when I'm talking about roster construction, I always talk about how important those import spots are. It seemed like it would be a real stretch to use 2 of your 8 import spots on keepers. So right now, with the departure of Stephanie Bukovic, the new keeper is American, and then to have another keeper use up one of those spots, it seemed like that probably wouldn't be the optimal use of those spots. So now it frees it up for one of the other positions.
Yeah, and that new goalkeeper from America you mentioned is Caitlin Talbert.
Thank you for I didn't have it in the notes and I couldn't remember off the top of my head. So thank you for that.
No worries. And you were right that Bristol City WFC is the club that Jackie Burns played for before coming to Calgary. However, only logged 1 appearance for Bristol in 2024-25. That was in the League Cup. So was also struggling for playing time with that team.
The Wild didn't announce any new player signings this week, but they did talk about some players that they have extended their contracts. Some pretty prominent names on that list.
Yeah, they announced the retention of Tilly James, Michaela Moore, Janaea Robertson, Grace Storty, and Sarita Thurton.
Yeah, I don't think there's any real surprises there. 4 of those players were pretty regular contributors and starters, and Tilly James, her season was cut short by an injury. So, but my understanding right now is that they've got 19 or 20 returning players and then the new keeper additions. So they really have about 4 or 5 roster spots to fill and 2 import spots in there. So hopefully we'll be hearing about some signings soon.
Yeah, and you did some digging as you're prone to do, Jason, and kudos to you for this. You unveiled in our notes here that this is kind of a trend among NSL clubs. Pretty much every team is focusing a lot on continuity and returning the bulk of their squad from 2025.
Yeah, I've been commenting about how, how it's an interesting way of approaching the season, not making the playoffs and returning like 19, 20 players. But, when you look at it, most teams are retaining a similar amount. These counts are maybe not exact, but I think they're pretty close. I had Toronto's returning 19 players, Vancouver's returning 19 players, Montreal's returning 20 players, Ottawa's returning 15 players, and Halifax is returning, 10 or 11, but they were the worst team in the league by a pretty wide margin. But not very many teams have done significant changes. It's been pretty status quo for most everyone.
And I guess that could reflect that maybe some players were signed on 2-year deals, but generally it does suggest that the teams are going to look pretty similar to how they did last year.
I've been thinking about the thought process there, and maybe they're working on the basis right now. The Wild finished the season pretty strong. They looked pretty good at the end of the season. So maybe they think that they've got the right ingredients, and if Callie Johnson's not injured and Tilly James isn't injured, and they make a couple of key additions, that maybe they've got what it takes to make the leap up. They're lacking a couple positions right now. They're lacking center back, and they could definitely use some more scoring. Wouldn't you say those would be a couple of the big areas they would need?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Callie Johnson and Maggie Doherty Howard, I would expect them to be the main goal getters for Calgary, but they're going to need a little bit more scoring depth than they had in 2025. Hopefully, the players that they do announce in these coming weeks will have a flair for goals, because I think fans will want to see a lot more goals in 2026 than they did in the inaugural year.
For sure. And also, the Wild have 2 center backs signed right now. They've got Michaela Moore and they've got Talia White. Tilly James and Sonia O'Neill can play that position, but I think it's pretty safe to say you would want to enter the season with at least one more natural center back on your roster.
Agreed.
Hi, guys. This is Noah Herdlicka, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, we got a few notes to wrap things up, and one of my favorite events is making its way back to Calgary this year, Scott.
Well, Calgary adjacent, Jason. This is Tsutina Nation. Yeah. Canadian Futsal Nationals coming up pretty soon, early April. So it'll be back at Seven Sheet Sportsplex after it was held in Regina last year. But this will be the third time in 4 years that this location has hosted the tournament.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out there and watching some futsal. So that'll be coming up soon enough.
And before we wrap up our episode, we wanted to talk about some of the Calgarians who are maybe playing overseas or who have signed with new clubs. Some of our former podcast guests. Looks like Noah Herdlicka, former UBC player, has signed for Bay Olympic, which is a team in New Zealand.
I think I saw on social media he just got down there. So good luck to him in his first pro contract.
And former Mount Royal University Cougars captain and former Cavalry draft pick, Caden Rogozinski. He is doing his MBA, but playing for Newcastle University, who compete in the 7th division of the English football pyramid.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good mix, getting a chance to continue your education and meanwhile play a bit in the English lower divisions.
And then finally, we wanted to give a shout out to two-time podcast guest Kendall Showers, still doing really well for her team in Athens, Greece. Recently scored 2 goals in her last match, which propelled, what are they called? Santa. Right? Which propelled Santa into the Final Four of the Women's Greek Cup.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find out other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links there so you can buy Scott's book. It's called Here Come the Cavalry, and it's all about the history of pro soccer in Calgary. You can leave us a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media, Blue Sky, Instagram, X, Threads, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.